and I don't have answers to. But there are some things that I do know, and that I know that if a jury knew, that they would have come to a different decision. The issue with the ballistics and the gun, they would have found out that the shell casings found there didn't match the weapon that they're saying is the murder weapon. That still hasn't been brought up in any of the court hearings, you know, and that's that's something I didn't know, but that one of the attorneys working on the case now told me about. And those are like fingerprints. It's something that wasn't brought up in trial, you know, and I think that the jury should have been able to hear that.
In the Texas, few stories are as haunting and complex as that of Frances Elaine Newton, a woman whose life spiraled from a loving Texas upbringing to the cold finality of death row. Born on April 12, 1965 in Houston, Texas, Frances grew up in a large religious family, one of 11 siblings. Her childhood was marked by warmth and support, with parents who treated her fairly and siblings who were her closest companions. Yet, beneath this idyllic surface, choices and circumstances would lead her down a path of tragedy, betrayal, and unanswered questions. As a teenager, Frances was drawn to the wrong crowd, particularly a young man named Adrian. Their relationship ignited quickly, and at just 15, Frances gave birth to their son, Elton. Despite the disapproval of her devout Christian family, they rallied around her, offering support that allowed her to graduate high school and later become an accountant. "I was blessed to have the support I did," Frances later reflected, acknowledging the strength of her family.
I had a lot of support. I had my first child early. My parents were very disappointed in me, but they said, okay, this happened, don't make the mistake again, you know, and they encouraged me to continue being a teenager because I was a teenager. But at the same time, they helped me to be a good mother to my son. And Adrian's mom and dad were very supportive, as was he.
It must have been tough, so young.
You know, it really wasn't, because I had my big sisters and my big brothers, and so my son had all these aunts and uncles around and grandparents. It really wasn't tough. I mean, I don't say that to encourage teenage pregnancy. I think that I was very blessed to have the support that I did.
Adrian's family was equally supportive, and their son grew up surrounded by love from aunts, uncles, and grandparents. Frances and Adrian married, had a daughter named Farah, and settled into an apartment in Houston. But their marriage was far from a fairy tale. Adrian's descent into drug addiction cast a shadow over their lives. Both he and Frances began buying, selling, and using drugs, and infidelity plagued their relationship. Adrian's repeated affairs drove Frances to retaliate in kind, a decision she later regretted. "I wanted him to feel what I felt," she admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of her choices.
Adrian hadn't been faithful in the marriage for several times, and on my part, after so many times, I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna do this and let him see how it feels, you know, and I did, and that wasn't a good thing on my part. So one of the things that I was gonna fix is I wasn't gonna do that anymore. Unfortunately, I had started a relationship with a guy that I'd gone to school with, and of course he was upset about that, and I wanted him to be, because I wanted him to feel what I had felt, you know. And when I say that I wanted to fix it, that's one of the things that I had done, is said cut that relationship off. And he said that he would quit doing, you know, quit running around, he would quit doing drugs, and he would quit doing illegal activity.
And you believed you trusted?
Yes, I did.
They made a pact to stop cheating, but it was a hollow promise. Both continued seeing others while living under the same roof. By 1986, Frances's life took another dark turn. At 21, she was caught forging documents, resulting in 3 years of probation. That same year, she was fired from a job for theft, a stain on her otherwise promising career as an accountant. Amid these troubles, a State Farm agent, Claudia Chapman, approached Frances with a proposal for auto insurance, which she declined. Chapman then suggested life insurance policies, touting their savings-like benefits. Frances initially refused, But a family tragedy in February 1987 changed her perspective. After her cousins perished in a house fire, leaving her family unable to afford proper funerals, Frances's father urged her to prepare for the unexpected. In March 1987, Frances took out $50,000 life insurance policies on herself, Adrian, and their daughter Farah, with an existing policy already in place for Elton. To secure the policies, Frances forged Adrian's signature, a decision that would later haunt her. She claimed Adrian had quit drugs, citing the absence of stashes in their medicine cabinet and his fearful behavior, including nights spent hiding under the bed. She believed he was being threatened by a drug dealer, a fear that would soon intertwine with a night of unimaginable horror. On the evening of April 7, 1987, at their apartment on 6126 West Mount Houston Road, the Newton family's fragile world shattered. Adrian was home with his brother Sterling and their children. At around 6:45 p.m., Adrian spoke with his girlfriend Ramona Bell on the phone, telling her he planned to sleep after Frances left. Frances later claimed she left at 6 p.m. to pay her car insurance, answering a call from Adrian's friend Alphonse Harrison before departing. Alphonse, however, said he was left on hold for 45 minutes, contradicting her timeline. Frances drove to her cousin Sandra's house, 13 minutes away, carrying a mysterious blue bag. Sandra later recalled seeing Frances place the bag in an abandoned, burned-out house next door, the same house where her cousins had died in the fire. Between 7:45 and 8:02 p.m., Frances and Sandra returned to the apartment. The phone rang, and Frances answered, saying, "I think he's asleep. I'll see if I can wake him." Moments later, she let out a piercing scream. Adrian, Elton, and Farah were dead, shot to death. Adrian lay on the couch while the children were found in their beds. Sandra ended the call to dial 911, and at 8:27 p.m., Harris County Sheriff's Deputy R.W. Tew Ricks arrived to a scene of devastation. The investigation quickly turned chaotic. A day after the murders, an anonymous woman reported seeing a red pickup truck at the scene, driven by a black male around 30 years old, but police failed to pursue the lead. Sandra later tipped off investigators about the blue bag, which they recovered from the abandoned house. Inside was a .25 caliber semi-automatic pistol, traced to Michael Moon, who had loaned it to his cousin, Jeffrey Freelow, Frances's boyfriend. Jeffrey admitted the gun was kept in a drawer accessible to Frances, who was doing his laundry. On April 21st, Frances attempted to claim the life insurance policies. The next day, she was arrested and charged with capital murder. The trial was fraught with inconsistencies. Gunpowder residue, nitrates, was found on Frances's skirt, but her defense argued it could have come from fertilizer, cosmetics, or other sources as her family maintained a large garden. No residue was found on her hands or shirt, unusual for a close-range shooting. The defense also claimed the shell casings at the scene didn't match the gun recovered, and Frances insisted she had taken a different gun from the apartment, one she found in the medicine cabinet and hid to protect her family from Adrian's troubles. Frances maintained her innocence, pointing to a drug dealer named Charlie, whom Adrian allegedly owed $2,500. Sterling confirmed the debt, but investigators never pursued this angle. An ear witness reported hearing a gunshot around 7:30 p.m., but this testimony was excluded from trial. Frances's former lawyer, Ron Mock, admitted to inadequate preparation, failing to call key witnesses or thoroughly review evidence. Despite these issues, Frances was convicted on October 25, 1988, and sentenced to death by lethal injection. Frances spent nearly 18 years on death row, her case riddled with doubts. Appeals highlighted the prosecution's failure to test the nitrate residue conclusively and the exclusion of ballistics evidence suggesting the recovered gun wasn't the murder weapon. Her new legal team claimed a third gun was found, and police had told Frances's father, B. Henry, that initial ballistics tests cleared her. Sandra's testimony described Frances's inconsolable grief upon discovering the bodies, insisting she couldn't have been involved. Despite a 120-day stay of execution granted by Governor Perry in 2005, citing inadequate prior representation and missing evidence, Frances's appeals were denied. On September 14, 2005, she faced her execution in silence, refusing a last meal or final words. Her story remains a chilling enigma, a tale of a troubled marriage, a flawed investigation, and a justice system that left more questions than answers. Was Frances Newton a cold-blooded killer driven by greed, or a woman ensnared by circumstance and a drug-fueled world? The truth, like so much of her story, remains elusive. 2. Melissa Lucio. Melissa Lucio, a 38-year-old from Harlingen, Texas, lived a hard life by 2007. Born in 1969, she was a mother of 14 kids, struggling in poverty with her partner, Robert Alvarez. Neighbors said she loved her children but faced abuse, drugs, and stress. Family told police Melissa was worn down, often yelling at her kids in their cramped home. On February 17, 2007, her 2-year-old daughter, Mariah, was found dead, sparking a case that divides opinions. Around 7 p.m., in a rundown Harlingen apartment, paramedics responded to a 911 call. Melissa said Mariah fell downstairs and wouldn't wake up. The toddler had bruises, bite marks, and a head injury. Police found no stairs in the apartment, just a steep outdoor step. An autopsy showed Mariah died from blunt force trauma, with signs of abuse over weeks. Melissa admitted to spanking her but denied murder. Police interrogated her for hours. She confessed after pressure, saying she hit Mariah, but later recanted. Her kids told detectives she was rough but not a killer. Melissa was arrested that night, charged with capital murder. Her trial began October 13, 2008, in Brownsville. Prosecutors said she beat Mariah to death out of frustration with parenting. They showed photos of the toddler's injuries and played her taped confession. Witnesses, including social workers, said Melissa neglected her kids. The defense argued Mariah's injuries came from a fall and older siblings' rough play, citing no direct proof of murder. Melissa told the court she loved Mariah and didn't kill her, but the jury believed the confession. After 2 hours on October 17, 2008, they found her guilty. Judge Arturo Nelson sentenced her to death, calling it a brutal act against a helpless child. Mariah's family grieved a sweet girl. Supporters claim Melissa was framed. Prosecutors said her motive was stress, with no mental illness proven, just neglect. Now 56, Melissa sits on death row at Mountain View Unit, appealing her case. New evidence, like medical reports suggesting a fall, has paused her execution since 2022. Her case fuels debate over justice and coercion, leaving Harlingen divided over a mother's guilt. 3. Kimberly Cargill. Kimberly Cargill, a 44-year-old from White House, Texas, lived a troubled life by 2010. Born around 1966, she was a single mother and nurse's aide, caring for her son and working at a nursing home. Neighbors said she seemed friendly but had a mean side, often arguing with family. Friends told police Kimberly struggled with money and anger, with a history of abusive relationships. In 2010, she was dating Cherry Walker, a 39-year-old disabled woman who needed constant care. Family said Kimberly grew frustrated with Cherry, who was set to testify against her in a custody case. Kimberly saw Cherry as a threat to keeping her son. On June 8, 2010, in a quiet Tyler suburb, Cherry went missing. Around 7 p.m., Kimberly picked her up from her group home, saying they'd grab dinner. Cherry never returned. Days later, a worker found her body in a ditch off FM 2972, burned and beaten. Police found tire marks matching Kimberly's van nearby. An autopsy showed Cherry died from blunt force trauma to the head, then was set on fire with gasoline. Cell phone records placed Kimberly at the scene, and surveillance video showed her buying gas cans that day. A co-worker said Kimberly bragged about handling a problem. Kimberly was arrested on June 12, 2010, charged with capital murder. Her trial began May 7, 2012, in Smith County. Prosecutors said she killed Cherry to stop her testimony and out of anger at her caregiving burden. They showed texts where Kimberly called Cherry a problem and DNA linking her to the body. Witnesses, including her ex, said she was violent and controlling. The defense argued someone else attacked Cherry, saying Kimberly only drove her that night. Kimberly told the court she cared for Cherry and didn't hurt her, but the jury didn't believe her. After 3 hours, on May 11, 2012, they found her guilty of capital murder. Judge Jack Skeen Jr. sentenced her to death, calling it a vicious act against a vulnerable woman. Cherry's family spoke of losing a gentle soul. Her group home grieved. Prosecutors said Kimberly's motive was control and fear of losing custody, with no mental illness, just rage. Now, about 59, Kimberly sits on death row at Mountain View Unit, appealing her case. Her cruelty ended a defenseless life, leaving Tyler shocked. 3. Brittany Holberg. Brittany Holberg, a 23-year-old from Amarillo, Texas, lived a rough life by 1996. Born in 1973, she grew up in a troubled home, battling drug addiction and working as a prostitute to survive. Friends said she was kind but desperate, often in bad relationships. Neighbors told police she moved around cheap motels, scraping by. In 1996, she was hooked on crack and needed cash fast. She met A.B. Towery, a 70-year-old retired man, through her work. Family said Brittany saw him as an easy mark, but when he fought back, her fear and greed turned deadly. On November 13, 1996, in a quiet Amarillo apartment complex, Towery was found dead. Around 8 p.m., a neighbor heard a struggle and called police. Officers found Towery's body in his apartment, stabbed over 50 times with a knife and beaten with a hammer. Blood soaked the floor and a broken lamp was nearby. Brittany's fingerprints were on a knife in the kitchen. Witnesses saw her leave Towery's place carrying a bag. Police learned she'd been with him that day, offering sex for money. A stolen wallet with Towery's cash was found in a dumpster, linked to Brittany by a motel receipt. Brittany was arrested days later, charged with capital murder. Her trial began March 2, 1998, in Amarillo. Prosecutors said she killed Towery to rob him after he resisted her demands for more money. They showed DNA linking her to the scene and witnesses who heard her brag about handling an old man. The defense argued self-defense, saying Towery attacked her first. Brittany told the court she fought back to survive, but the number of stab wounds showed rage, not defense. After 3 hours, on March 10, 1998, the jury found her guilty of capital murder during a robbery. Judge Abe Lopez sentenced her to death, calling it a savage act for small gain. Towery's family spoke of losing a kind grandfather. Amarillo mourned. Prosecutors said Brittany's motive was money and addiction, with no mental illness, just desperation. Now 52, she sits on death row at Mountain View Unit, appealing her case. Supporters claim her rough life wasn't considered enough, but evidence points to greed. Her violent choice ended a man's life and left a community shaken. 4. Linda Carty. Linda Carty, a 42-year-old from Houston, Texas, lived a chaotic life by 2001. Born in 1958 in St. Kitts, she moved to the U.S. and worked as a teacher's aide while secretly informing for the DEA. Neighbors said she was charming but manipulative, often in financial trouble. Family told police Linda craved attention and had a newborn daughter she struggled to care for. In 2001, she became obsessed with proving she was a good mother. She targeted Joanna Rodriguez, a 25-year-old neighbor, believing she could take her newborn son to raise as her own. Her desperation and deceit led to a deadly plan. On May 16, 2001, in a quiet Houston apartment complex, Joanna went missing. Around 1 a.m., 3 men broke into her home, tied up her husband, and took Joanna and her 4-day-old baby. Later that day, police found Joanna's body in a car trunk outside Linda's apartment, suffocated with duct tape. The baby was safe nearby. Witnesses saw Linda with the men earlier, and phone records showed her calling them before the kidnapping. A tipster said Linda planned to borrow a baby but panicked when Joanna fought back. Evidence, including duct tape in Linda's car, tied her to the crime. Linda was arrested on May 18, 2001, charged with capital murder. Her trial began February 19, 2002, in Houston. Prosecutors said Linda orchestrated the kidnapping and murder to steal the baby, driven by a twisted need to seem like a perfect mom. They showed texts linking her to the men and witnesses who heard her talk about needing a child. The defense argued the men acted alone, and Linda was just a bystander. Linda told the court she was innocent, only asking the men to scare Joanna, but the jury saw her as the mastermind. After 4 hours on February 25, 2002, they found her guilty of capital murder. Judge Carol Davies sentenced her to death, calling it a cold, selfish act. Joanna's family spoke of losing a loving mother. The community grieved her baby's loss. Prosecutors said Linda's motive was delusion and control, with no mental illness, just obsession. Now 67, Linda sits on death row at Mountain View Unit, appealing her case. Her supporters claim a flawed trial, but evidence points to guilt. Her scheme cost a young life and shocked Houston. Kathy Lynn Henderson. Kathy Lynn Henderson, a 37-year-old from Austin, Texas, lived a simple life in 1994. Born in 1957, she ran a daycare from her home, caring for kids, including her own daughter. Neighbors said she seemed kind but stressed, juggling bills and kids. Family told police Kathy had a temper and struggled with money after a divorce. In January 1994, she was watching 3-month-old Brandon Baugh, whose parents trusted her. When they asked about his safety, Kathy grew annoyed, feeling they didn't respect her. Her frustration turned deadly, seeing Brandon as a problem. On January 21, 1994, in a quiet Austin neighborhood, Brandon went missing. Around noon, Kathy told his parents he was fine, but they couldn't reach her later. Police visited her home and found it empty. Days later in Missouri, Kathy was stopped for speeding, with no sign of Brandon. She said she gave him to another family, but her story changed. Police found Brandon's body in a field near Temple, Texas, his skull crushed. An autopsy showed he died from blunt force trauma, likely a fall or hit. Evidence, including Kathy's packed bags and a missing shovel, suggested she fled and hid the body. Kathy was arrested on January 25, 1994, charged with capital murder. Her trial began February 6, 1995 in Austin. Prosecutors said she killed Brandon in anger, possibly shaking or dropping him, then covered it up. They showed her car's tire tracks near the body and a neighbor's statement about her rushing out that day. The defense argued it was an accident. Brandon fell from her arms and she panicked. Kathy told the court she loved kids and didn't mean harm, but the jury saw intent to hide the crime. After 2 hours, on February 10, 1995, they found her guilty of capital murder. Judge John Wisser sentenced her to death, calling it a reckless act against a helpless baby. Brandon's family spoke of losing a joyful child. Austin grieved. Prosecutors said Kathy's motive was frustration and pride, with no mental illness, just a bad choice. In 2017, her sentence was commuted to life with parole eligibility after 23 years due to new evidence suggesting an accident. Now 68, Kathy serves at Lane Murray Unit, eligible in 2017. Her case still sparks debate over intent. 6. Erica Yvonne Shepard. Erica Yvonne Shepard, a 21-year-old from Houston, Texas, lived a desperate life in 1993. Born in 1972, she grew up in poverty, dropping out of school and battling drug addiction. Friends said she was quiet but troubled, often hanging with bad crowds. Neighbors told police she lived in rundown apartments, scraping by through theft and drugs. Family mentioned her struggles with money and a young son to raise. In June 1993, she teamed up with Jerry Brown, a friend, to rob someone for cash. They targeted Marilyn Sage Meeher, a 43-year-old mother, seeing her as an easy mark for her car and jewelry. On June 6, 1993, in a quiet Houston neighborhood, Marilyn was attacked. Around 10 p.m., Erica and Jerry followed her to her apartment on Greenbrier Drive. They knocked, pretending to need help, then forced their way in. Erica held a knife while Jerry beat Marilyn with a statuette. They stabbed her multiple times and slit her throat, leaving her dead on the floor. They stole her purse, rings, and car keys, then fled in her Mazda. Police found the car abandoned nearby with Erica's fingerprints inside. A neighbor saw two people running, and a tip led to Erica and Jerry. Blood on Erica's shoes matched Marilyn's. Erica was arrested on June 8, 1993, charged with capital murder. Her trial began April 18, 1994, in Houston. Prosecutors said Erica planned the robbery and murder for quick cash, showing no mercy. They presented the bloody knife, her fingerprints, and Jerry's testimony that Erica led the attack. Witnesses, including friends, said she bragged about the haul. The defense argued Jerry was the killer and Erica was just scared, caught up in his plan. Erica told the court she didn't mean to kill and only wanted money, but the jury saw her as cold. After 2 hours on April 25, 1994, they found her guilty of capital murder during a robbery. Judge Doug Shaver sentenced her to death, calling it a ruthless act. Marilyn's family spoke of losing a loving mom. Houston grieved. Prosecutors said Erica's motive was greed and drugs, with no mental illness, just desperation. Now 53, Erica sits on death row at Mountain View Unit appealing her case. Jerry got life. Her choice for easy money ended a life and shocked a community. 7. Lisa Ann Coleman. Lisa Ann Coleman, a 28-year-old from Arlington, Texas, lived a tough life by 2004. Born in 1976, she grew up in poverty with a history of petty crime and drug use. She lived with her girlfriend, Marcella Williams, and Marcella's 9-year-old son, Devontae, in a small apartment. Neighbors said Lisa was loud and rough, often clashing with Marcella. Family told police she struggled with anger and felt burdened by Devontae, who had developmental issues. In 2004, Lisa and Marcella neglected Devontae, seeing him as a problem. Their frustration and cruelty led to a tragic end. On July 26, 2004, in a quiet Arlington apartment, paramedics responded to a 911 call. Lisa said Devontae wasn't breathing. They found the boy dead, weighing only 35 pounds, half what a 9-year-old should weigh. His body was covered in scars, burns, and ligature marks from being tied up. An autopsy showed he died of starvation and abuse, with infections from untreated wounds. Police found ropes in a filthy room where Devontae was locked. Neighbors heard cries for weeks but thought it was discipline. Photos showed Lisa and Marcella ignored Devontae while eating well themselves. Lisa was arrested that day, charged with capital murder. Her trial began September 12, 2006, in Fort Worth. Prosecutors said Lisa starved and beat Devontae to death, hating his needs. They showed medical records of his emaciation and photos of his injuries. Witnesses, including social workers, said Lisa locked him away to avoid trouble. The defense argued Marcella was the main abuser, and Lisa just followed along, scared. Lisa told the court she didn't mean to kill Devontae, only to punish him, but the jury saw her as cruel. After 1 hour, on September 15, 2006, they found her guilty of capital murder. Judge James Wilson sentenced her to death, calling it a heartless act against a helpless boy. Devontae's family spoke of losing a kind child. Arlington mourned. Prosecutors said Lisa's motive was resentment, with no mental illness, just neglect and rage. Marcella got life. Lisa, executed on September 17, 2014, at age 38, was the 9th woman killed by Texas since 1976. Her case, from Mountain View Unit, shocked the state, exposing a child's slow, painful death. 8. Pamela Perillo. Pamela Perillo, a 24-year-old from Houston, Texas, lived a chaotic life in 1980. Born in 1956, she grew up in a rough neighborhood, hooked on heroin by her teens. She drifted through seedy bars, working odd jobs and selling drugs. Friends said she was tough but lost, often high with her boyfriend, James Brittle. Family told police Pamela was desperate for cash and drugs, resenting her dead-end life. In February 1980, she and James targeted Robert Banks, a 30-year-old drifter, and his friend Bob Skeens, 38, for their money and car. Their addiction and greed sparked a brutal crime. On February 22, 1980, In a quiet Houston suburb, Pamela and James lured Robert and Bob to a remote cabin on Rope Lane. Around midnight, they got the men drunk, then attacked. Pamela helped tie them up with rope. James shot Robert in the head with a .22 caliber rifle, and Pamela strangled Bob with a cord while James beat him. Both men were left dead, their bodies dumped in a ditch. Police found the cabin soaked in blood, with Pamela's fingerprints on the rope. A stolen car was traced to her, and a bar friend said she bragged about taking care of 2 guys. Pamela was arrested on March 1, 1980, charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Her trial began November 10, 1980, in Houston. Prosecutors said she planned the robbery and murders for drug money, showing no mercy. They presented the rope, fingerprints, and James's testimony that Pamela was eager to kill. Witnesses said she laughed about the crime. The defense argued James led the attack and Pamela was too high to plan it. She told the court she didn't mean to kill, just rob, but the jury saw her as ruthless. After 3 hours, on November 15, 1980, they found her guilty. Judge Thomas Root sentenced her to death, calling it a cold-blooded act. The victims' families spoke of losing kind men. Houston was shaken. Prosecutors said Pamela's motive was greed and drugs, with no mental illness, just cruelty. James got death but died in prison. In 2009, Pamela's sentence was commuted to life with parole eligibility after 40 years due to trial errors. Now 69, she serves at Lane Murray Unit, eligible in 2020. Her drug haze cost 2 lives and her freedom. 9. Betty Lou Beets. Betty Lou Beets, a 46-year-old from Gun Barrel City, Texas, lived a hard life by 1983. Born in 1937, she was a mother of 6, married 5 times, and worked as a waitress. Neighbors said she seemed tough but worn, often clashing with her husbands. Family told police Betty survived abuse but had a mean streak, especially when drinking. In 1983, she was married to Jimmy Beets, a 43-year-old firefighter. Friends said Betty was tired of him, wanting his insurance money and freedom. Her greed and anger led to a secret, deadly plan. On August 6, 1983, in a quiet Henderson County home, Jimmy vanished. Betty told police he went fishing and never returned. Months later, a tip led to a search of their property. In a wishing well, police found Jimmy's body, shot twice in the head with a .38 caliber gun. Nearby, they dug up Doyle Barker, her 4th husband, killed in 1981, also shot. Both bodies were wrapped in sleeping bags. A .38 pistol was found in Betty's home, and her son, Robert, said she confessed to shooting Jimmy after he passed out. She had claimed his $100,000 insurance. Betty was arrested in June 1985, charged with capital murder for Jimmy's death. Her trial began October 7, 1985, in Athens, Texas. Prosecutors said she killed for money, shooting Jimmy and hiding his body to cash in. They showed the gun, ballistics matching, and Robert's testimony. Witnesses said Betty bragged about being free. The defense argued she was abused and acted in fear, claiming Robert helped kill Jimmy. Betty told the court she didn't shoot anyone, but the jury didn't believe her. After 4 hours on October 11, 1985, they found her guilty of capital murder. Judge Don Carroll sentenced her to death, calling it a greedy, planned act. Jimmy's family spoke of losing a kind man. The community was stunned. Prosecutors said Betty's motive was insurance money with no mental illness, just cunning. Appeals citing abuse and bad lawyers failed. Betty, at 62, was executed on February 24, 2000 at Huntsville Unit, the 4th woman killed by Texas since 1976. Her case, from Mountain View Unit, shocked Gun Barrel City, revealing a woman's deadly greed buried in her backyard. 10. Suzanne Margaret Basso. Suzanne Margaret Basso, a 44-year-old from Houston, Texas, lived a manipulative life by 1998. Born in 1954, she was a mother and former seamstress, but her life spiraled into crime and deceit. Neighbors said she was cunning, often lying to get her way. Family told police Suzanne had a history of fraud and a controlling streak. In 1998, she lured Louis "Buddy" Musso, a 59-year-old mentally disabled man, from New Jersey to Texas with promises of marriage. Friends said she saw Buddy's Social Security benefits as easy money. Her greed and cruelty led to a horrific murder. On August 25, 1998, in a quiet Houston suburb, Buddy was found dead in a ditch off Highway 288. His body was battered, bruised, burned, and broken from days of torture. Police traced him to Suzanne's apartment, where blood, a broken chair, and bleach stains were found. An autopsy showed Buddy died from blunt force trauma after weeks of beatings by Suzanne and her group, including her son and 4 others. Witnesses said she starved him, locked him in a closet, and beat him with belts and bats, laughing as he begged. Her son's girlfriend tipped police, revealing Suzanne's plan to claim Buddy's benefits. Suzanne was arrested on August 28, 1998, charged with capital murder. Her trial began January 11, 1999, in Houston. Prosecutors said she orchestrated Buddy's torture and death for his money, using her group to do the dirty work. They showed photos of his injuries, blood evidence, and testimony from accomplices who said Suzanne led the abuse. Neighbors heard screams from her apartment. The defense argued her son was the real killer, and Suzanne was too weak to stop it. She told the court she liked Buddy and didn't hurt him, but the jury saw her as the mastermind. After 2 hours on January 15, 1999, they found her guilty. Judge Robert Jones sentenced her to death, calling it a sadistic crime. Buddy's family spoke of losing a gentle man. Houston was horrified. Prosecutors said Suzanne's motive was greed, with no mental illness, just cruelty. Her accomplices got lesser sentences. Suzanne, at 59, was executed on February 5, 2014, at Huntsville Unit, the 8th woman killed by Texas since 1976. Her case, from Mountain View Unit, exposed a chilling betrayal of a vulnerable man.